The knock on the door came at exactly 10 p.m., sharp enough to cut through the silence of the house like breaking glass. Rowan Mercer had been sitting alone in his kitchen, staring at a half-finished cup of cold coffee and pretending not to think about the life he used to have. Rain hammered against the windows, thunder rolled across the sky, and for one strange second, he thought maybe he had imagined the sound. Nobody visited him anymore. Not since the divorce. Not since his ex-wife had walked out with the final pieces of the future they once promised each other. But when the knock came again, louder this time, Rowan stood up with a sinking feeling in his chest and opened the door to find a woman drenched from head to toe, her mascara smeared by rain and tears, clutching a small overnight bag with trembling hands. It was Selene Vale, his ex-wife's best friend. And the moment their eyes met, she whispered the words that would change both their lives forever. "I had nowhere else to go." Before we continue, if you believe people deserve kindness, healing, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Storyverse. Your support helps these emotional stories reach more hearts around the world. Rowan hadn't seen Selene in almost 2 years. During his marriage, she had always been around, always standing beside his ex-wife Ivy like a protective shadow. Selene was the kind of woman who rarely smiled fully, as if life had taught her early that happiness never lasted long enough to trust. She had dark auburn hair that curled naturally around her shoulders and eyes that carried exhaustion even when she laughed. Back then, Rowan barely knew her beyond polite conversations at dinners and birthdays. But now she stood on his porch looking shattered, soaked by the storm, holding herself together by the thinnest thread imaginable. He stepped aside without thinking, and she entered quietly, leaving small pools of rainwater on the wooden floor. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old memories. It had once been filled with music, laughter, arguments about paint colors, Sunday breakfasts, and dreams of children that never came. Now it felt hollow, like a shell abandoned after the tide pulled away. Rowan handed Selene a towel while trying to process why she was there of all places. The divorce had been brutal. Ivy had accused him of caring more about his architecture projects than their marriage. Rowan had accused her of giving up too easily. By the time the papers were signed, neither of them recognized the people they had become. And after everything, the last person he expected at his door was Ivy's closest friend. Selene sat quietly at the kitchen table while Rowan heated soup on the stove. The storm outside raged harder, wind rattling the windows as though the night itself was angry. She looked exhausted beyond words, staring down at her shaking hands. Rowan noticed bruises hidden beneath the sleeve of her sweater. Faint purple marks. His stomach tightened instantly. He didn't ask questions right away because something about her silence felt fragile, like touching broken glass with bare fingers. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked so softly he almost didn't hear it. She admitted that she had left her boyfriend that night after months of emotional abuse that had slowly become physical. She had nowhere safe left to go. Her parents were gone. Most of her friends had drifted away. And Ivy was overseas on a business trip she couldn't reach. For hours, Selene had sat in her car trying to decide what to do before realizing Rowan was the only person she believed might still open the door for her. That confession hit Rowan harder than he expected. Because despite the loneliness divorce had carved into him, despite the bitterness he carried, someone still saw him as safe. Reliable. Kind. It had been a long time since anyone looked at him that way. He gave her the guest room without hesitation, though neither of them slept much that night. Rowan stayed awake listening to the storm while memories crept through the darkness. The empty side of the bed. The echo of arguments. The way silence becomes unbearable after losing someone you built your life around. Somewhere down the hallway, Selene cried quietly into a pillow, thinking nobody could hear her. But Rowan did. And for the first time in months, his own pain didn't feel like the only sadness in the world. Morning arrived wrapped in pale sunlight and the smell of fresh coffee. The storm had passed, leaving the neighborhood washed clean beneath the soft glow of dawn. Selene looked embarrassed when she entered the kitchen wearing one of Rowan's oversized sweaters. She apologized repeatedly for showing up unexpectedly, but Rowan simply told her she could stay as long as she needed. Something in her expression shifted then. Relief mixed with disbelief. As though kindness had become so rare in her life that she no longer expected it from anyone. Days slowly turned into weeks. Selene found temporary work at a local bookstore while Rowan continued managing his architecture firm downtown. Their routines became unexpectedly peaceful. Mornings filled with coffee and quiet conversations. Evenings spent cooking simple dinners while old jazz music played softly in the background. For the first time since his divorce, Rowan began laughing again. Real laughter. The kind that catches you off guard and reminds you that happiness can return without warning. But healing is never simple. Some nights Selene woke from nightmares, panicked and shaking. Rowan would hear movement from down the hallway and find her sitting on the kitchen floor with tears streaming silently down her face. She confessed one evening that abuse had changed how she saw herself. Her boyfriend had spent years convincing her she was difficult to love, too emotional, too broken, too weak. Rowan listened carefully, understanding more than she realized. Divorce had left him feeling like a failure too. Ivy's final words still haunted him. She had once told him he made people feel alone even when he stood beside them. The strange thing about pain is how it recognizes itself in others. Rowan and Selene never planned to become important to each other. It happened quietly. Through small acts of care. Through listening. Through surviving lonely nights together without judgment. Rowan noticed how Selene hummed softly while reading books on the couch. She noticed how he stared at old family photographs when he thought nobody was watching. They began rebuilding parts of themselves simply by existing in the same space. One bright Saturday afternoon, Rowan drove Selene to a lake outside the city. The water reflected sunlight like shattered glass, and children ran along the shoreline laughing while couples held hands nearby. Selene admitted she hadn't felt peaceful in years. Rowan looked at her standing beneath the warm daylight, wind moving through her hair, and realized something terrifying. Somewhere along the way, he had started caring about her far more deeply than he intended. But guilt followed immediately after. She was Ivy's best friend. Crossing that line felt dangerous, almost wrong. As weeks passed, tension grew quietly between them. Not dramatic tension, but the kind built from lingering glances and unfinished thoughts. Rowan fought against it constantly. He convinced himself it was temporary loneliness, nothing more. Yet every time Selene smiled at him across the dinner table, something inside him softened. And Selene felt it too, though fear held her back. After surviving abuse, trusting another person felt impossible enough. Falling for someone again felt terrifying. Everything changed one evening when Ivy unexpectedly returned to town early and appeared at Rowan's house unannounced. The moment she saw Selene standing in the kitchen wearing Rowan's sweatshirt, silence crashed into the room like thunder. Ivy's expression shifted from confusion to betrayal in seconds. Rowan tried explaining, but emotions exploded too quickly. Ivy accused them both of humiliating her. Selene tried to apologize through tears, insisting nothing inappropriate had happened, but Ivy refused to listen. Old wounds reopened instantly. Years of resentment, heartbreak, and misunderstanding poured into that small kitchen until nobody recognized where the truth ended and anger began. After Ivy stormed out, Selene packed her bag quietly. Rowan begged her not to leave, but she insisted she had already destroyed enough relationships. She thanked him for saving her when she had nowhere else to go, then walked out into the cold evening before he could stop her. The silence that followed felt unbearable. Rowan stood frozen in the doorway long after she disappeared from sight, realizing the house already felt empty again. The next few days became torture. Rowan couldn't focus at work. He replayed every moment with Selene repeatedly, understanding too late that she had become the most important person in his life. Not because she rescued him from loneliness, but because she saw him honestly. She understood his pain without asking him to hide it. And somewhere in helping her heal, Rowan had started healing too. 3 days later, Ivy called unexpectedly. Her voice sounded exhausted rather than angry. She admitted she had overreacted because seeing them together forced her to confront a painful truth. Their marriage had ended long before the divorce papers. They had simply stopped choosing each other. And deep down, Ivy knew Rowan deserved happiness again, even if it hurt to accept it. Before hanging up, she quietly told him where Selene was staying. Rowan drove across town immediately. The small apartment building looked worn down, tucked between a laundromat and an old grocery store. When Selene opened the door, shock flooded her face. She looked exhausted, eyes swollen from crying, but Rowan barely noticed anything except relief that she was standing there. He told her the truth then. The complete truth. That losing his marriage had convinced him love only ended in disappointment. That he had spent 2 years emotionally numb before she knocked on his door during that storm. And that somewhere between midnight conversations and quiet mornings, she had reminded him life could still surprise him in beautiful ways. Selene cried harder than he had ever seen before. Not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming weight of finally being seen and loved without conditions. Rowan held her as sunlight streamed through the apartment window, warm and golden against the walls. For the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. If this story is touching your heart so far, take a moment to like, comment, and share this video with someone who still believes broken people can heal together. And if you've ever experienced loneliness, betrayal, or a second chance that changed your life, subscribe to Storyverse, because these stories are for you. Months later, Rowan's house no longer felt empty. Selene filled it with warmth in ways that had nothing to do with romance. Plants sat near the windows. Music played while dinner cooked. Laughter returned naturally instead of painfully. They took things slowly, carefully, understanding that real love isn't built through grand gestures alone. It grows through safety. Through patience. Through choosing each other on ordinary days. One afternoon, Rowan found Selene standing in the sunlight of the kitchen, smiling while watering plants. For a moment, he simply watched quietly, overwhelmed by how unexpected life could be. The woman who arrived at his door broken and terrified had become the reason the house finally felt alive again. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all was this: neither of them had saved the other completely. They had simply reminded each other they were still worth saving. Before the story ends, tell us in the comments, do you believe people can truly find love again after heartbreak, or do some scars last forever? Your thoughts may comfort someone reading them today. Years later, Rowan would still remember that stormy night in perfect detail. The knock at the door. The trembling voice. The rain falling endlessly outside. Because sometimes life changes not through huge miracles, but through small moments when someone chooses compassion instead of turning away. A single open door can become the beginning of an entirely new life. And for Rowan Mercer and Selene Vale, the darkest night either of them had ever faced became the reason they finally found light again. If this story moved you even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Storyverse. Your support helps keep these emotional stories alive for people who may need hope today more than ever.